get her out.
Now, as you know, it's been 39 days since Joe Biden dropped out, 39 days since Kamala Harris has been declared the Democrat nominee, and of course, 39 days of her avoiding any type of sit-down interviews. She's finally sat down with CNN's Dana Bash for this softball interview, and remarkably, it took a little less than a minute for Kamala to bring up Donald Trump's name.
The voters are really eager to hear what your plans are. If you are elected, what would you do on day one in the White House?
Well, there are a number of things. I will tell you, first and foremost, one of my highest priorities is to do what we can to support and strengthen the middle class. When I look at the aspirations, the goals, the ambitions of the American people, I think that people are ready for a new way forward. I think, sadly, in the last decade, we have had in the former president someone who has really been pushing an agenda and an environment that is about diminishing the character and the strength of who we are as Americans, really dividing our nation, and I think people are ready to turn the page on that.
Remarkably, it took her less than 1 minute to bring up Donald Trump, claiming that Americans are ready to move on from him and, quote, it's time to turn the page on Donald Trump. Now, what she failed to mention is the sheer fact that she's been in power for the past 3.5 years, guys, okay? We turned the page on Donald Trump 3.5 years ago. They want to claim that Donald Trump is the one that's dividing up the country, not the Democratic Party, not the mainstream liberal media, not Hollywood, not the music industry. No, it's all Donald Trump. It's always been Donald Trump for the past 3.5 years. Definitely not Kamala Harris and the Democratic Party. Now, of course, I don't expect CNN's Dana Bash to give any type of pushback on Kamala Harris for what she's done the past 3.5 years, but they are well aware of their work, considering that Scott Jennings called them out on their bullshit during the DNC when they were sucking the teat of Kamala Harris.
She's in the White House right now. Democrats have controlled the White House for 12 of the last 16 years. And for all of the talk about division and the problems in the country and people are hurting, Democrats have mostly controlled this country. Trump had it for 4. The Obamas and Biden had it for the rest of the time. And somehow it's still all Trump's fault. And somehow she hasn't been at the center of it. So to me, that's still the glaring hole in this campaign that hasn't yet been solved at the convention. How do you explain all of the problems that will be solved by the person who is currently in there for the last 3.5 years, who is supposed to already be working on solving it?
So yes, Scott Jennings leaves the CNN DEI hires absolutely speechless after mentioning the fact that Democrats have been in power for 12 of the past 16 years. But yet somehow Kamala Harris, who by the way is also a DEI hire, is blaming everything on Donald Trump. Now, however, I'll give credit where credit's due. Dana Bash did ask a really good question about the economy of Donald Trump versus the economy of Kamala Harris. Check this out.
You talked about, you call it the opportunity economy. You are well aware that right now many Americans are struggling. There's a crisis of affordability. One of your campaign themes is we're not going back. But I wonder what you say to voters who do want to go back when it comes to the economy specifically, because their groceries were less expensive, housing was more affordable when Donald Trump was president.
Well, let's start with the fact that when Joe Biden and I came in office, during the height of a pandemic, we saw over 10 million jobs were lost. People, I mean, literally, we were all tracking the numbers. Hundreds of people a day were dying because of COVID. The economy had crashed. In large part, all of that because of mismanagement by Donald Trump. of that crisis. When we came in, our highest priority was to do what we could to rescue America. And today, we know that we have inflation at under 3%. A lot of our policies have led to the reality that America recovered faster than any wealthy nation around the world. But you are right. Prices, in particular for groceries, are still too high. The American people know it, I know it, which is why my agenda includes what we need to do to bring down the price of groceries. For example, dealing with an issue like price gouging, what we need to do to extend the child tax credit to help young families be able to take care of their children in their most formative years, what we need to do to bring down the cost of housing. My proposal includes what would be a tax credit of $25,000 for first-time home buyers, so they can just have enough to put a down payment on a home, which is part of the American dream and their aspiration, but do it in a way that allows them to actually get on the path to achieving that goal and that dream.
So a couple things I need to address when it comes to Kamala Harris's answer is when she talks about inflation. Now, she does state that, hey, under my administration, we're at 3% inflation rate, which is correct, but down to 3% from what exactly? I don't know. Perhaps the whopping 8% inflation rate back in 2022 under her and Joe Biden's administration. And then let's also compare that to when Donald Trump left office back in 2020, leaving the inflation rate at 1.23%. And of course, she blames this on Donald Trump, saying that he mismanaged his 4 years in office and I'm just cleaning up the mess, right? But then she goes on to say that grocery prices are still way too high. I know it and the American people know it. Yeah, we've been knowing that for the past 4 fucking years when inflation was at 8% and you guys were funding a proxy war in the Ukraine. Now, I'll go a little bit more into detail on that. However, she blames it on price gouging. These evil grocery companies that are just evil. They're just evil companies that are just so greedy, hiking up their prices for the sake of greed. And they just want our hardworking money and that they're just price gouging us. She says that's why grocery prices are high, but it's still somehow Donald Trump's fault. Don't really understand how that correlates, but that's what her claim is. Now, as you know, the Democratic Party have been funding the proxy war over there in Ukraine, along with a bunch of neocon Republicans. Now, war is always going to raise the prices of food, lumber, steel, and gas. Now, this is just one component along with the inflation rate and along with an overabundance of working illegal immigrants that come into this country, which, by the way, the borders are over here, Kamala Harris has allowed to happen. And this is why the prices of food, lumber, steel, gas are all so high and our wages are still so low. Thank you, Kamala Harris. I think I'll put my vote with Donald J. Trump.
And we will make America great again.
Okay, so this was probably the most softball interview that Kamala Harris could have had. And she chose correctly to go with CNN and Dana Bash to do this interview because they weren't going to give any type of real pushback. In fact, CNN afterwards, talking about the interview with Dana Bash, didn't really focus anything of the concerns of the American people. Instead, they decide that they're going to be talking about how Kamala Harris first heard that Joe Biden was going to drop out of the presidential run and how emotional that was for her.
It was a Sunday, so here, I'll give you a little too much information.
Go for it. There's no such thing, Madam Vice President.
My family was staying with us. Pancakes and, Auntie, can I have more bacon? Yes, I'll make you more bacon. And then we were sitting down to do a puzzle. And the phone rang and it was Joe Biden. And he told me what he had decided to do. And I asked him, "Are you sure?" And he said yes. And that's how I learned about it.
Dana, that is very, very interesting. And for those of us who lived through that weekend in a lot of different ways, she found out that morning and she asked him, "Are you sure?" That's extraordinary. That's extraordinary. That's extraordinary. That's extraordinary.
It is extraordinary.
Okay, so shout out to CNN. for covering information that the public gives no flying fuck about. However, notice how they're treating Kamala Harris currently when she is the Democratic nominee compared to back in 2020 when she wasn't selected to be the nominee. It was, in fact, Joe Biden that they were hyping up.
How Kamala Harris's campaign unraveled. They obtained the resignation letter of the Harris campaign state operations director, who is now joining the Bloomberg campaign. She wrote, "It is unacceptable that with less than 90 days until Iowa, we still do not have a real plan to win. Our campaign for the people is made up of diverse talent, which is being squandered by indecision and a lack of leaders who lead."
So surprise is that she has failed to turn it around despite literally months and months and months of hearing this kind of frustration. And you hear it, it's reporters, it's people inside the campaign, it's people outside the campaign, it's pretty much every voter that you meet on the campaign trail who goes to see her. And the common theme is people want to like her, and then she doesn't close the deal. She's not able to articulate a consistent and compelling message that makes those voters who show up for her, who are interested in what she's selling, that makes them decide, yes, this is the candidate I can commit to.
And she's been all over the place in terms of messaging.
Yeah, they've tried out a number of different messages over the past several months and just tried to see what is stuck. And it's been difficult to follow her campaign because there have been so many different messages. And one of the biggest debates that she's having internally is whether she wants to be sort of this progressive, left-wing California liberal, or whether or not she wants to be more of a moderate. And both of those lanes are currently clogged up. And the fact that she's kind of vacillating between the two of those makes it difficult for any voter to stick to her when there are so many other options.
Yeah, so there you go. Only 4 short years ago, when the network was bashing on Kamala Harris, is now sucking the teat of Kamala Harris being an amazing candidate to go against Donald Trump. Again, kind of looks like it's just Operation Mockingbird at play. So anyways, guys, that's all I have for you guys today. Like, subscribe, comment down below all your thoughts. And of course, this has been Project Reveal Pod. I'm your host, Jake Varr, and I'm going to catch you guys on the next one. Trump 2024. Peace.